All right, I will say good morning, a good tevach. Wonderful, Baruch Hashem to be back. New week, last week of Maseches Sotah. Emeretz Hashem, what a wonderful and exceptional, incredible journey. And it'll end just as magnificently as we began. So we begin by thanking our sponsors for this morning, sponsors for this morning share. Thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for the month of Iyar, Stephen Teri Czinn, in honor of their newest grandson, Matan Shmuel Aharon. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD TORAH, he will grow to be an incredible Ben Torah, source of nachas for his mishpacha, ad mea ve'esrim shanim tovos. Also, a public service reminder. Today is Mother's Day. And incredibly, don't be one of those people who says, oh, every day is Mother's Day. Yeah, people who say every day is Mother's Day, that's another way of saying no day is Mother's Day. Again, and even if you're wonderful to your mother, and by the way, also don't go ahead and try to use the line that I don't have to celebrate Mother's Day for my wife because she's not my mother, right? I've heard that one a couple of times. Again, always backfires. Sure to backfire. However, again, on a serious note, it's so important. You know, the role ultimately, again, of a mother and the role of a wife in a home and in a family cannot even be described. What a mother does in a mishpacha can never be truly understood and can never be fully appreciated. So make sure if a person is zocheh to have their mother in this world, to be able to take the opportunity and just express hakara satov, and just take the opportunity to thank one's mother for all of the things you know about, and remember all of the incredible things that you don't know about. And if a person is privileged, Baruch Hashem, to have a spouse who has put in all of her effort to raise children or is raising children, make sure to take the time today to express the proper hakara satov as well. So with that, let us begin. I'm sorry? Thank you to Gabi and Shana Cohn for sponsoring the Mizonos this morning for the Daf Yomi share in honor of their son's Eli's bar mitzvah. Shkach. All right, well, so with that, let us begin. Mishnah. Today's Daf is Memvav 46. We are beginning at the Mishnah on the bottom of Memhem Beis 45b. A lot to do today. You may have noticed the Dafim are a little bit longer than usual, but Baruch Hashem filled with, actually, it'll move quickly today. I like to say that, even though it's clearly not true. Okay, let's begin. So let's say, the Mishnah on Memhem, days 45b. Niftiru Ziknei Yerushalayim b'Holklan. So let's remember again, we're going through in the Mishnayos the process of Egla Arufa. So at this point in time, remember the Mishnah picks up where the measurement is done by members of the Sanhedrin, right? Which is very interesting. The measurement itself done by the members of the Sanhedrin. So the Mishnah picks up, the members of the Sanhedrin have determined the closest city to the corpse. At this point in time, the members of the Sanhedrin take leave. Ziknei Osayir, Ziknei Osayir Mevin Eglas Bak. Mevin Eglas Bak Asher Lo Mashcha Ba'al. So at this point in time, once the elders of the Sanhedrin leave, so then the elders of the closest city, they begin their process. And what do? So step one, they bring an Eglas Bakar, a young calf, that has Asher Lo Mashcha Ba'al, that has never pulled a yoke, which again essentially means has never done work. The Ein Hamun Polsaba. Interestingly enough, we don't care if the Egla Arufa has a mum or not. Mum a blemish does not disqualify by the Egla Arufa. And we go ahead and we bring this young calf down to Nachal Esan. I will say we're going to see Nachal Esan is not the name of a place. Rather, Nachal Esan is a descriptive term. We bring it down to a nach. What does this mean? Now, Esan kemashma'o kasha. But so we bring it down. Now, Nachal literally again is a dried riverbed, right, or a valley, right. So the idea of is we bring it down to an area that has not been worked, right, infertile ground. Now we'll see exactly what that means. Afa, so the Gemara says, Afa pi she'eno esan kasher. But at the end of the day, even if you bring it to a place that's not esan, where the earth is not hard, ultimately, again, the Egla Rufa process is kosher. And we literally, again, break the neck of the calf from behind. I will say, really, what we're aiming for is decapitation, right? It's not just the breaking of the neck, but ultimately, again, it's the decapitation of the calf from behind. And the area upon which the calf was decapitated, you are not permitted to go ahead and work that soil, work that land, or plant it. But you can comb flax there, or chisel stones there. So now, I would say after the elders have decapitated the calf, the next thing they do is they wash their hands. They wash their hands on the place where the decapitation took place. And they recite the following. Our hands have not spilled this blood. So we'll say, it's almost, so quite literally, we'll say, by the way, the notion of washing your hands of responsibility, that expression, I wash my hands of responsibility, comes from Egla Arufa, right? That's where this comes from. They're washing their hands over this, saying, we do not bear any responsibility for what happened to this individual. So the Mishnah says, V'chi al da'asenu, also sheziknei beis shofchi damheim. I don't understand. Is there even such a halamina? Do we even have to, did they have to make such a statement like this? Did we have any suspicion that the elders of the Beis Din went ahead and washed their hands? Rabbi Gemara says, that the elders of the Beis Din went ahead and spilled this blood? Is there ever such a halamina like that? To which the Gemara says, no, Ella, shelo ba'al yadinu patrinu below mazon, velo ra'inu v'nichu below leviyah. Rather, what they were saying was, we did not shirk our responsibilities towards this individual. See, we're going to discuss this more in the Gemara. The overarching tragedy of the Egla Arufa, of this situation, is someone died because he was alone. Someone was killed because, in other words, that's how we understand this narrative. We find this corpse. Why is he dead? Why is he dead? Someone murdered him. And the assumption is, why was he murdered? Why did this happen? Or why was this able to happen? Because he was alone. He was alone. And because he was alone, he was vulnerable. So therefore, when the zikanim of the closest city come along, and they wash their hands, and they say, Yadin lo shafchu dam zeh, what they're saying was, we did not neglect this person. Or at least, we did not intentionally neglect this person. It's not like we saw him and didn't offer him hospitality. It's not like we saw him and we didn't offer him escort. We just didn't see him. Somehow, we missed him on the communal radar, which I will say is such an incredible yesod if you think about it. You see, we'll say, what they're saying is, we didn't intentionally neglect him. Now, Chevra, Lamaisa, was he neglected? Yeah. Which tells you an incredible yesod, that in community, almost by default, there are people who are peripheralized, marginalized, and neglected, not because the community doesn't care, but just because it's what happens. Right? Often you just can't keep track of everyone. So by definition, even if we're feeling, and even if we're attentive, there are people who just slip through the cracks. And that's why, again, just on a community level, on a shul level, on a kehillah level, it's so important to always be attentive to the people around us. Because you never know who's struggling, you never know who's alone, and kind of the more communal eyes that we have that are open and attentive, the more we do our job of holding each other close. And incredibly so they washed their hands over this egla just to say, obviously the guy was left alone. He was neglected, but not chas v'shalom intentionally. Now we'll say, now apparently the pasuk makes reference to the fact that the kohanim, that there are kohanim are present. So what do the kohanim say? The kohanim omrim kapra li'amcha Yisrael sher padisa v'altitin dam naki b'karav amecha. So we'll say the kohanim say, please Chakadosh Baruch Hu, atone for your nation that you have redeemed, and do not allow innocent blood to be shed within the midst of your people. So lo hayu tzrichen lomar v'nechaper lahem adam. So the kohanim did not have to say the phrase and let the blood be atoned for them. El racha kodesh mevas rasan. But rather, again, I will say it was almost as if in other words, racha kodesh would state this. So ultimately, I will say that last phrase, v'nechaper lahem adam, the kohanim did not have to say it. Why? Because it was understood that after you go through the process of Egla Arufa affects atonement. So when it says Ruach HaKodesh Mevas Rasan, it doesn't literally mean that there was a spirit of prophecy. What it means is there's a cause and effect. Kadosh Baruch Hu says, if you engage in the process of Egla Arufa, then by definition, atonement comes. Well, say incredible. Says the Gemara, so remember again, one of the things that the Mishnah said, so we're introduced to a number of things over here. First, and just in the halachos of Egla Arufa itself. Number one, we're going to see that has to be a young calf, within 1 year old. Number two, blemishes do not negatively impact. In other words, you could use an Egla Arufa even if it is blemished. Okay, I will say, now number 3 is lo mashcha ba'ol. It did not do work. So you have to have an egla that's within 1 year, never did any work, but we don't care. We don't care if it has a mum. Fine. Now says the Gemara, V'hei mum posal be'egla mikal v'chomer. Why don't we say that a mum, a blemish, should invalidate an egla arufa based on a kal v'chomer? What's the kal v'chomer? Umapar. So we'll say, so now what we're going to see is a prolonged discussion regarding similarities and differences between egla arufa and para aduma. Right? So remember again, just to get our terms straight. Egla arufa, right? Decapitated calf when you find the corpse. Para aduma, red heifer, that's used, whose ashes are used ultimately to purify from tumas meis. So watch this. So the Gemara says, Uma para she'ina shanim post l'spa. When it comes to para aduma, we don't really care how old the animal is. Right? There's no age requirement for the animal. So mum poseba, yet again, obviously again, a mum does invalidate a para aduma. Egla sheshanim post l'spa. So an egla rufa, where age is a qualifier or disqualifier, eno din shemum poseba. We should say that a mum should also passel by egla rufa. To which the Gemara says, shiny hasam, egla rufa is different. Why? Damakra asher ein ba mum. Because it will say, the pasuk says by the egla, by the para, ein ba mum. Mum posel, ve'ein mum posel ba egla. A mum is only passels by an egla rufa, by paraduma, but not by egla rufa. Fine. Elamiata, lo yushar avodos poslos ba. But now I should say that maybe avoda working with para aduma shouldn't go ahead and invalidate it. Alama Amar Yehuda Amar Rav. But yes, why is it the same name of Rav? Himiach ala uda shel sakin psula. They both say this is very interesting. When it comes to para aduma, even if you just placed, literally again, uda shel sakin means a bundle of sacks, right? A bundle of sacks on the para aduma. Ultimately, again, it's psula. So we'll say, now what's interesting about that? Right? What's interesting about that? What's interesting about that is, even though the paraduma didn't do anything, right? It's just holding the stuff on its back, right? It didn't do anything. Nevertheless, that passes. Ube egla achetim shoch. So we'll say an interesting distinction. Both paraduma and egla rufa, you're not allowed to work the animal. Yet the definition of work seems to be different for both. By paraduma, once the animal carries any semblance of a load, even if it didn't move, that passes the animal. By egla rufa, achetim shoch. Until what? Until it moves. Until it carries something. In other words, carry through movement. Shiny para haduma is different. Why? The alfinan all me egla. Because you make the gzer shava of all from egla. Any yoke that is upon it. Egla nami tisi all me para. So why don't we say egla rufa should also learn out all from para? Let's make it a reverse limud also, and say that just as carrying a load, even without moving it, disqualifies by paraduma shapa, is disqualified by egla rufa. Hamiet rachmana ba beegla. So hamiet rachmana ba. Torah uses an exclusionary phrase of ba. Beegla nami ksiv. Beegla rufa also says ba. Hahu mi baile limiute kadshim. So we'll say, interestingly enough, the ba of egla rufa comes to exclude kadshim, sacrificial animals. Exclude them from what? Listen to this. To the paslabu avoda. Very interesting, I will say. Very interesting. Sacrificial animals are not disqualified if you work them. Interesting, right? So I just want to point out, egla rufa, disqualified if you work it. If you work it, right? Paraduma, disqualified if you work it. I would have thought along the same lines, kadshim, sacrificial animals, disqualified if you work them. Kamash malan, ba. Ba is a limiting phrase that appears by egla rufa paraduma. Only those animals are disqualified by work. Sacrificial animals not disqualified by work. Fascinating, no? No? Yeah, thank you. Good, right? Fascinating. We'll say, listen to this. Watch this. Now, I would have thought as follows. I might have thought learn out from Makabel Chomer from Egla Rufa. Uma Egla she'ein mum posaba. Egla Rufa is not disqualified through a mum. Okay? Yet, avoda poseles ba. Yet I will say working the animal does disqualify the animal. So I would have thought what? Kadshim shemum poseles bahen. Eno din shavoda poseles ben. So kadshim, right? Sacrificial animals which are disqualified through a mum, certainly what? Avoda work should disqualify them as well. To which the Gemara says, no, ikalam ifrach, because you can make up yercha, right? You can destroy the kavach, you can undermine the kavach chomer. Ma'ala egla shekin shanim poslos ba. Egla rufa will say also has an age disqualification, right? It's got to be within a year. Within a year, we'll say, yeah, with Okay, more to say about this. We're going to have to get through this stuff. Right, Shekain, remind me about age. Shekain Shalom Postos Ba Atu Kadshim. So the Gemara says, but one second, Egla Rufa is different. Why? Because you have an age issue, right? You can age out, which the Gemara seems to say doesn't apply by Kadshim. To which Gemara says that's not true. Ikala Mifrach. Malik Agla Shekain Shalom Postos Ba Atu Kadshim. Mileka de Pasuk B'Shanim. Both say that. Are you saying that by Karbanos, sacrificial animals, ultimately, again, age does not play a role? I both say that's not true. We know, again, that by certain karbanos, there are age restrictions. Take a look, for example, let's say Rashi's on both sides of the page over here. Look on the left-hand column of Rashi, first line. Mileka de Pasuk B'Shanim B'Ari Pesach, the Chatos Tichsiv B'Hu B'nei Shnasan. Both say Karban Pesach and the Chatos have to be within a year. Right? So ultimately, again, you see that age plays a role by Kadshim as well, to which the Gemara says, you're right. Ki itzrich kra lahanach Kadshim de paslu b'hu shanim v'Kadshim de lo paslu b'avoda. So I'm sorry. So the Gemara says, let me read that again. Ki itzrich kra, when do I need the pasuk? Lahanach Kadshim de paslu b'shanim. So we'll say, Dafka, this is actually very interesting. What the Gemara is suggesting is like this. It's Dafka the Kadshim, which do have an age limitation, and in that respect, they are similar to Egla Rufa and Para Aduma, and therefore the Ba, by both Para Aduma and Egla Rufa, comes to say that it's only work that disqualifies by those two animals, but work does not disqualify by Kadshim. Incredible. So I'll say, so just we're aligning everything up. Just to understand one major distinction already is that there is an Isser Avoda. One can't work with a Para Aduma. One can't work with an Egla Rufa. Now granted, what we've already seen is there might be different types of work that disqualify those two animals. But a very important takeaway, the Isser Avoda does not apply by Kadshim, does not apply by Karbanos. So if you take a sacrificial animal and you work it, you haven't disqualified the animal. And I will say, now just to keep everything in mind, you haven't disqualified the animal, what have you done, potentially?
Made a blemish.
I'm sorry? Well, you might have made a blemish. Good. What else? What have you definitely transgressed? Mi'ilah. Remember, again, we're not getting into that right now, but use of a sacrificial animal for mundane purposes. So in other words, you use your sacrificial sheep to carry back your groceries from 7 Mile, right? So Lamaisa, you haven't disqualified the animal, but that's called mi'ilah. You can potentially blemish it, but even if you don't blemish it, that's called mi'ilah. Well, it's just and something to think about, by the way, how ultimately, again, certain things avoda work disqualify, and other things work don't disqualify. For Rabbi, just on a hashkafic level, why doesn't avoda disqualify by Kadshim? Because Rabbi is saying the whole yisod of Kiddusha, by definition, requires avoda. There is no Kiddusha without avoda. Avoda doesn't disqualify Kiddusha. Avoda creates Kiddusha. We're going to see that stands in contradistinction to other types of things, to other things like Tara, for example, which is Para Aduma, or Kapara, which is Egla Arufa. Just hold it in the back of your mind. But at least when it comes to Kadshim, just on a hashkafic level, Avoda can't disqualify Kiddusha because there is no Kiddusha without Avoda. All right, Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, "V'Kadshim d'lo paslu ba'avoda mehachan afkas." 1 second. Are you telling me that we learn out the concept that Avoda does not disqualify Kadshim from here? Is that learned out from here? Mehasamach, we learn out from elsewhere. Iveres, o Shavor, o Charutz, o Yabelas, o Garav, o Yalefes, lo sakrivu ela laHashem. So we'll say, this is talking about the different movement, the different blemishes that an animal could have that would render it unfit for sacrificial purposes. So the Gemara says, Eile, now again the Lashon is Eile, these. Eile yatamakriv, you can't offer up these animals of atamakriv Kadshim shenevda ban avoda, but you can offer up Kadshim ultimately, again, where the animal has done work. So we'll say this seems to be the source. So the Gemara is not disputing the halacha. What is the Gemara disputing? The source. You were telling me the source is learned out from Ba by Egla Rufa. Now the Gemara is learning it out from here. So what's going on? Istris, you need them both. Istris chadait chamina. So let's listen to this. I might have thought that ultimately, again, when does avoda not disqualify a sacrificial animal? That's when you performed a permitted type of avoda. Aval avodas isser ema l'siru. But what happens if the animal performed a forbidden type of avoda? Maybe ultimately, again, that should disqualify. Let's say, for example, Let's say you have a sacrificial animal which plowed your field on Shabbos. Isser D'Oraisa. You might have thought that such an avoda would disqualify the animal. Therefore, again, Kamash Shmuel, no. Kamash Shmuel is supposed to say two different psukim. One limud to teach me that avoda's heter, permitted work, doesn't disqualify the sacrificial animal, and the other to teach you that even prohibited work does not disqualify the sacrificial animal. So we learned this out from another source as well. Umiyad ben nechar lo sakrivu es lechem elokechem mikol eila. So the Gemara says mikol eila iyatam akriv. This you cannot offer up. Aval atam akriv kachim shenevda bahen avoda. But you could offer up sacrificial animals which were used for work. It's tricks chadai chanina. So we'll say I need it for the following reason. We'll say second wide line. We'll say, listen to this. I might have thought, when doesn't work disqualify a sacrificial animal? When you worked it before it became consecrated. The Gemara says, Aval avad bahen kishen kodshim ema lisseru. But I would have thought that if you worked the animal once it already became consecrated, perhaps it should become disqualified. Therefore, tzvicha. So I will say, essentially, I need all of these different limudim. So I will say, you have a whole bunch of limudim to teach you. In other words, number one, let's work backwards. Number one, not even if you worked the animal when it was already consecrated, it's not disqualified. Number two, if you did permitted work with the animal, it's not disqualified. And number three, even if you did prohibited work with the animal, it's not disqualified. So we'll say, let's go back to what we said before. Gufa. We'll say third wide line, mem vav amud aleph. Gufa. Amrav Yudam Rav. Hiniach ala oda shel sakin psula. So we'll say, remember, paraduma. Even if you just place a load on the animal. And I will say, now, uda shel sakin is relatively light load, right? It's a bundle of sacks, right? This is talking about like empty sacks. So you go and you put a bundle of sacks on the egla arufa, on the paraduma. Ultimately, again, the para is disqualified, right? What's the chiddush there? Even though the para has not pulled anything, right? It's just carrying something in a stationary position. It is possible. Uba egla acha timshach. But by egla rufa is only disqualified through work only once it pulls a load. So meisvei, so we raise the kasha. So meisvei, all inni ella all. Pasuk says all carries yoke. I only know about a yoke. Right? Shar avodos minayin. What about, again, other types of avoda? In other words, so we'll say, I don't know that it carries a yoke. What about other types of avoda? Amrit kavachomer. Says kavachomer. What's the kavachomer? Uma egla. When it comes to egla rufa she'en mum posaba, where a mum doesn't disqualify it yet, shar avodos poslospa, all other types of labor will disqualify. Para shemum posaba. Paraduma, where a mum does disqualify it, eno din shar avodos poslinba. Does it go without saying that other avodos do disqualify it? So the Gemara says, "V'mnash chalomar," but you can go further and say, "Ne'amar kan ol, v'ne'amar lahalon ol." It says over here ol, and it says over there ol. Ma lahalon shar avodos poslos, but just like over there by egla rufa, other avodos pasol. Afkan shar avodos poslos. So too over here, other avodos will be pasol. To which the Gemara says, "Ma nafsh chalomar." What does it mean if you want to say? You could always ask a pircha on this kavachomer. What's the pircha? Ma le'egla shekein shanim poslos ba egla of Rabbi. I remember has an age requirement. What's the age requirement? Less than a year, right? Within a year. So ultimately, again, therefore, shouldn't that call off the entire comparison? Or you could bring in kachim as the pircha. What's the pircha? Shemum posel bahen, because ultimately, again, mum passes by kachim, yet ve'ein avoda posel bahen, but avoda does not disqualify. The Gemara says, you're right. Ne'emar kan ol, ve'ne'emar lahalon ol. We'll say Gzer Shava says over here ol, it says over there ol. Ma lahalon shar avodos, just like over there, other types of labor disqualify. Afkan shar avodos. So too over here, other types of labor disqualify. So it's not just simply the carrying of a yoke, but rather, again, it's going to be any form of labor that has the ability to disqualify. Omimakom shebasa. And I will say, now let's go back to our original source of this halacha. Ma lahalon achetim shoch. Afkan achetim shoch. Well, let's say, if you're going to do that, then we should equate work in all respects. Meaning what, Rabbi say? The same way that the egla arufa is only invalidated when when it pulls a load, why don't we say the same thing by para aduma? That it's only going to be invalidated when it pulls a load. Not just simply carrying a load is not going to be enough. To which the Gemara says, you're right. Tanoihi. In reality, Rabbi say this concept of what type of work invalidates a para aduma is in fact subject to a machlokes tanaim. Here we go. The ikadamaisila me'egla. Tanaihi, tika demaisila me'egla, ikadamaisila migufa depara. Shabbos say there are some that learn the source of the work disqualification from egla rupa, and some who learn the source of work disqualification from paraduma. This sign here we go. This sign we learned all, ainly ella all. So when it comes to all, I only know that a yoke disqualifies. Sharavaldos minan. But how do I know that even other forms of labor disqualify? Talmud lomar asher lo aleha all mikomakom. Shabbos says it's almost as if we go ahead and we kind of split that phrase. We look at it as asher lo Allah aleha is work. All is a specific type of work. But that general phrase of asher lo Allah aleha ultimately teaches me that all forms of work disqualify. So the Gemara says, Imkein, Matan Shmuel all. So what's unique about all? In other words, if you're going to make a general statement, Asher lo Allah Allah teaches me that any type of work goes out and disqualifies. So what do I need all for? To which the Gemara says, all posel bein bishas avoda, bein shelo bishas avoda. This is fascinating. We'll say, watch this. A yoke disqualifies whether the animal is working or not. In other words, we'll say, the mere placement of a yoke on the animal ultimately goes ahead and says that animal is being worked. It disqualifies. So whether it's being worked or not being worked, it disqualifies. Shar avodos in poslos ella bishas avoda. Other avodas will say only disqualify when? If the animal is actively doing so. We'll say, I just want to point out something absolutely amazing. You see from here an incredible Musar Haskell as well. So we'll say, what the Gemara is saying is like this. The notion of just wearing a yoke, even without doing anything with it, is incredibly meaningful and is considered working. I will say, this is the best piece of Gemara we've ever learned. Because what does the teacher will say? See, what do we do every single day by Kriyas Shema? Right? What's our avodah by Kriyas Shema? Our avodah Shema Yisrael Shalokinu Hashem Echad. We are taking upon us all Malchus Shamayim. I'm accepting this, we call it the yoke. I'm accepting the sovereignty, the oneness, the leadership, the rulership of HaKadosh Baruch Hu on myself. Well, a lot of times we think to ourselves, that's really nice. But you know what? I'm not really living it. I'm accepting it, but I'm not living it. After all, again, I commit averos, I do things I'm not supposed to be doing. So clearly I'm not really accepting the sovereignty of HaKadosh Baruch Hu upon myself. We'll say, what do you see from this Gemara? The act of wearing a yoke, even if you don't do anything with it, is still considered to be halachically meaningful. The mere acceptance of the mere wearing it, I wear it. So we'll say, it's a Fushi Gemara, right? You put a yoke on the para aduma, you put a yoke on it, or you put a yoke on the egla rufa, you're done. You're done. I should say para aduma, still go para aduma, right? Para aduma, but the animal didn't move. The animal didn't go to the act of wearing a yoke. By definition of Zanavodah, we'll say for us as well. Sometimes we'll say the reality is, what's the hardest part about being a person? Hardest part about being a human being is living the things you believe in. There's so many things I believe in my heart, right? So many truths I live with. Right? I don't have problems knowing what I believe in. My problem is living what I believe in. And so often we think, well, if you don't live it, believing it is meaningless. It's not true. It's not true. Wearing the yoke, even if you don't take one step with it, is still something meaningful in the eyes of the Ribono Shel Olam. Wearing a yoke is a form of avodah, even if you don't take one step. Now, of course, the goal is to plow the field with the yoke, right? An animal that just stands there with a yoke is not going to be a very helpful or productive animal. So my goal is to take the yoke kabolas, ol malchus shamayim, and then live my beliefs. But sometimes we're in a state in life where, for whatever the reason, I can't live it. Even if you can't live it, wearing it, believing it, is still something meaningful as well. Incredible. So the Gemara goes right to Ve'ima asher lo aleh klal. So we'll say, maybe I should say like this. I should dash in the pasuk in a different way. Ve'ima asher lo aleh klal. Maybe that phrase, lo aleh, literally again, that nothing has come upon the animal. That's a klal. All prat, All is a specific statement. So we'll say, what do I have? I have a klal prat, and therefore, ein bechlal elamasha beprat. Ultimately, again, I would say that in general, again, we'll say whatever you have a klal and a prat. So ultimately, the klal is limited by the prat. So all in midiachrin alone. Maybe the pasuk is a klal or prat, and therefore, really, both say the result of the pasuk is it's only a yoke that disqualifies. Any other form of work does not disqualify. To which the Gemara says, asher ribuyuhu. Most of the word asher, right? Asher, ultimately again is a ribuy. That is an inclusive phrase. Okay. That support. V'tanya nami gabe egla ki agavna. We have a brisa by egla rufa with the same type of idea. All imi ella all. Let's say so again by egla rufa also. It says it can't carry a yoke. I only know a yoke. How do I know that other forms of avoda also disqualify? Talmud lomar asher lo uvad ba mikamakom. So we'll say once again I have the asher, which ultimately is a ribui. Im kema talmud lomar all. So what does the word all come to teach me? All posel bein b'shas avoda bein shelo b'shas avoda. We'll say something we said before. The wearing of a yoke so goes ahead and disqualifies the animal whether you're working the animal or not working the animal. Shar avodos ein posel elo b'shas avoda. Other types of avodah will say only disqualify when? If the animal is actually working. Ve'ema asher lo uvad ba klal, all prat. I will say same question. Why don't they say asher lo uvad ba? That phrase is a klal, a general statement. All is a prat, a specific statement. Therefore, what do I have? A klalu prat. Ve'em b'klal al mashe b'prat. And in general, again, with the klalu prat, they only have, the klal is limited by the prat. All in midi achrina lo. It comes to include an all and nothing else. Asher ribuyu. What's the same as we saw before? The word asher is a ribui. Incredible. Meshichas all bekamo. So remember again, when we speak about the pulling of the yoke, right? Meshichas all, pulling of the yoke. How much does the animal have to pull the yoke in order to be disqualified? Amrale kimale all. Ultimately, again, literally we'll say the size of the yoke. Ibailahu la'arka l'rachbo. Is that the length or the width of the yoke? Ultimately, again, the amount that an animal has to pull the yoke in order to be disqualified is the size of the width of the yoke, which is a tefach. A tefach. Why don't you just say tefach? Or why do you have to say the amount that an animal has to pull the yoke is the size of the width of the yoke, which is a tefach? Just say the amount that an animal has to pull a yoke is a tefach. Hakamash molan shiura de al tefach. Come and teach us that the size of the width of a yoke is a tefach. Who cares? Lamay nafkamina lamekachu memkar. The Bible says what that means is for business purposes. In other words, if you're in the market for a yoke, not a Mother's Day gift, right? If you're in the market, right, for a yoke, right? So we'll say, so now what happens? You buy a yoke, and it turns out you buy a yoke that is less than the size of a tefach, So ultimately, again, you might have thought that but a yoke is a yoke. No, the fundamental definition of a yoke is something that is the size of a tefach. Good, says the Gemara. I'm Rabbi Yochanan ben Shol. We'll say beautiful, beautiful Gemara here. We'll say, so what is this? What is this whole thing with Egla Rufa? We'll say we haven't spoken about this before. So we've been hyper focused on the details and on the halachic practices. Now the Gemara so now we've kind of outlined the halachic practices from this. The Gemara says, what is this? What is this? Right? You find the guy Nebuch murdered in between two cities. You bring out a calf to the closest city. The elders are coming. They're decapitating a calf. They're washing hands. What is this? What is this? To which the Gemara was here it is. So Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yavi davar shlo asa peros. Bring something that never produced peros, never produced fruit. A reference to the calf, right? Because it's a young calf. So therefore never had offspring. Bring something that never produced fruit. V'yar b'makom she'eno asa peros, and decapitate it in a place that is barren. Right? Nachal Esan, hard soil, that didn't produce fruit. V'yechaper amishlo yinichu lasos peros. And ultimately, again, let it atone for someone who did not have the opportunity to produce fruit, for the murdered person. So the Gemara says, my peros, what do you mean he didn't produce fruit? What does that mean? If you tell me it means that he never had children, so Shabbos say, so what about if the person who was murdered was old? Or the person who was murdered was sterile, was a sris? so then you wouldn't do Egla Rufa? To which the Gemara says, no. The Gemara says, Ella mitzvos. So we'll say, this is an incredibly profound idea. Right? The Gemara says, Peiros and mitzvos. So we'll say, so what is the tragedy? Right? And by the way, this in general is, we'll say, what is the tragic component of death? Right? The Gesher HaChaim talks about this in his Sefer on Avelos. Well, the Gesher HaChaim is a Sefer of Tukachinsky, and his Sefer Gesher HaChaim says, if we believe in Olam Haba, which we do, I believe in an afterlife, I believe in a world to come, which is infinitely better than anything we can have in this world. So why is it that when a person dies, we mourn? Right? Why do we mourn if we truly believe that our loved one is in a better place? So of course, Pashup Pshat, Shalom Aleichem says in class, Pashup Pshat is why we're mourning. I'm not mourning for the person who died, I'm mourning for me. Right? I've lost someone who I love, who I will no longer be able to interact with in this world. Right? So I'm not mourning for them. The sadness is not for them. The sadness is for me. I would say, but there is a second element. There is a sadness in death. There is a sadness in death for the person who's died. What's the sadness? Person no longer has the ability to accomplish. But say the most incredible thing about living in this world is the opportunity to do mitzvahs. It's the opportunity to make a difference. The opportunity to affect change. The opportunity in any given moment when I'm living and breathing, even to be able to go out and we'll say to do things in this world. We'll say, and I'll point out. There's a very dangerous word that's bandied around a lot in today's healthcare landscape, which is quality of life, right? And people think that they could define what quality of life is. And if a person can't go ahead and respond, so I just want to tell you something. Even a person who Rahman al-Islam can't go ahead and, let's say, operate or function on their own, and let's say speak or interact, we'll say, sometimes a person who can't do anything themselves becomes a chafza shel mitzvah, literally an object of a mitzvah that allows everyone else to do chesed. Sometimes it's not just about what you do for yourself, but it's about what you enable others to do as well. So I will say, so the whole yesod in this world is mitzvos. That's the whole idea. That's the beauty. So when someone dies, there's a sadness that they feel because you could have done more. You could have accomplished more. You could have been more, even if the person was fantastic. So the Gemara says, that's the chap of Egla Rufa. What do we do? What's the sadness when we find this corpse? Now you're dead, and you can't do more mitzvos in this world. And that's a loss. That's a loss for you. That's a loss for your family. That's a loss for humanity. So what do? We take a young calf, which is not going to have a chance to birth offspring. We decapitate it on soil that cannot be worked to produce peiros, to atone for a person who can no longer produce peiros in this world. And I will say, what are your peiros? I will say this is incredibly important. Your peiros are not your children, right? Your peiros is certainly not your bank account. Your peiros is not your business. I will say, people like to think that their greatest accomplishment is their children. It's a dangerous road to go down. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you a little secret. Sometimes children don't do what we want them to do. And sometimes they don't live the lives we want them to live. So if you hinge your entire personalistic success on your children, that's a real gamble of the dice. Your greatest accomplishment is not your offspring. Your greatest accomplishment is you. Rabbi Yitzchak Berditchev Zechusi Agin Alina says this is a pshat. Eile told us Noach. What are the greatest offspring of Noach? Right? That's the generation. What's the greatest thing that Noach produced in his lifetime? Noach. Because you is the only thing you control. The creation of you is the only thing you control. We know this. You could birth children, raise children, give them every single opportunity to go and actualize personalistic greatness, and surprisingly enough, they may choose something else. Right? It's not my failure as a parent. I did anything and everything I could. My child has bechira chavshis, they're going to do. That's why, and you see this all the time, that people think their greatest success is my kids. You have to put everything into your kids, but you do not control what they're going to become. Your greatest success, and conversely, Hashem, your greatest failure, is you. And I will say that's why the peiros we have in this world are not even our children. They're beautiful. But the peiros we have in this world is you, or your mitzvos. Because that's the fruit, that's the offspring, that's the results that you control. And it says the Gemara, that's the tragedy of Egla Arufa. We take something that didn't produce Peiros, go ahead and decapitate in a place that can't produce Peiros, to mourn for someone who can no longer produce Peiros. Because the tragedy of death is the inability to accomplish more. And the tragedy of life is when you think that something outside of you is your success. Recognize your greatest success in life is what you make of yourself. Let's go back there. Says the Gemara, my perot, good, fine. Moridin osan nachal esan, isakan shol kasha. So we'll say we take the calf down to nachal esan. What's esan? Esan means hard. Tan rabban, minayla esan shu kasha. How do you know that esan means kasha? That is one long page that on the base. Okay. Looks longer than it did last night. All right, so okay. Let's go. We got this. What's esan? Esan means, Sigmar says, Esan moshavecha, v'sim b'salan chanecha. Va'omer, so in this context, actually, Esan means strong, or tav. Va'omer, shimu haram esrib Hashem, va'esan amos te'aretz, achim omrim minayim la'esan shu yashan, shenamar goy Esan hu goy me'olam hu. So others say Esan means old. So either way, it means, again, old, strong, or ultimately tough. We go ahead and we decapitate the calf from the back of the neck. My timer, gamar arifa mechatas. Or was making gzera shava of arifa from chatas. Or was similar again. Chatas ha'ov is how do you shech the chatas ha'ov? Malika, right? So again, Malika is done with the extended thumbnail of the Kohen. So remember again, I will say, where is it done? From the back of the neck. So just as the chatas ha'ov is decapitated from the back of the neck, so to again egla rufa from the back of the neck. What's the interesting halach over here? You are not allowed to plant anything or to sow anything on the soil, on the area where the calf was decapitated. So Tanabanan, the pasuk says, Asher lo yi'aved bo. Asher lo yi'aved bo velo yizareya. So the Gemara says, L'sha'avar di Rabbi Yoshia. So this is very interesting. Rabbi Yoshia says, where is the calf decapitated? In other words, not only is there an isser to plant there going forward, but it should be a place where what? It was never planted before either. Right? Nothing was ever planted there. So the Rabbi Yoshia, Rabbi Yonasan says, no. It doesn't really matter what was done there in the past. What matters is what? Going forward, you're not allowed to plant anything there now. Rav Amar Lahaba. So we'll say Rava says ultimately again it only applies going forward. So the Gemara says Dukuli Amalo Polig Dichsivalo Yizarea. So we'll say so Rava says like this. Everyone agrees that obviously you can't plant anything on that area going forward because the pasuk says Dichsivalo Yizarea keep legally sha'ava. So we'll say what's the machlokes? The machlokes is can you do? So we'll say it's very interesting. Everyone agrees the area where the egla is decapitated you cannot plant anything there going forward. What's the machlokes? The machlokes is can you do the decapitation in a place which was planted and sown and planted in the past? So the Gemara Rabbi Yoshia Savar Miksev lo Yeubad, Rabbi Yonasan Miksev Asher lo Ne'avad. So I will say so against each of them. So Rabbi Yoshia Amar the Sha'avar. Rabbi Yoshia Asher the Sha'avar Mashma. Rabbi Yoshia says Asher means even in the past. Rabbi Yonasan Asher Ribuyahi. He says the Asher is ultimately again a Ribuy. So we'll say so again. Fundamental machlokes. Here's what we come out with. Everyone agrees the area where the calf is decapitated. You certainly can't plant anything there going forward. The shayla is can you use a space which was historically planted? That's a machlokes. Let's go back there. You're allowed to sow flax. You're allowed to chisel stones. Tarabanon. Asher lo ye'avad bo. So we'll say the pasuk says ultimately again a place, right? Lo ye'aved bo. So the Gemara says lo ye'aved bo for lo yizarea. Ainli elazriya. So we'll say I only know that you can't plant shara avodas. And we'll say how do I know that you can't do other avodas to do with the soil? Talmud lo marsha lo ye'aved bo mikol makom. Says you can't work the land. Im kema tamar lo yizarea. So we'll say if it's going to say you can't work the land, why does that say lo yizarea? Lo malacha mazriya miyuched shibu gufa shel karka. So we'll say these lines just keep getting wider, right? It's like a good. So we'll say it's first of the widest line. So I'll say now listen to this. Just like zriya, just like planting is unique in that it's a avoda done with the soil. Af kol shihi begufa shel karka. So we'll say what kind of work is prohibited? Any type of work done with the actual soil itself. What does this come to exclude? Yatsa Srigas Pishtan V'nikor Avanam She'ena B'gufa Shel Karka. This comes to exclude, Rabosai, combing of flax, chiseling of stone, which has nothing to do with the earth itself. So in other words, Rabosai, essentially the distinction is like this, is you can't work the earth, but you can work on the earth, right? So in other words, you can't do any soil-related activities, but Lamaisa, again, you could do other types of avodah on the soil itself. Okay, so the Gemara says, "Ve'ema asher lo ye'avid ba'klal." Why don't we say asher lo ye'avid ba'klal? V'lo yizarea prat. So we'll say it's a klal prat. Ein beklal elamash prat. So we'll say in general, whenever you have a klal prat, so the klal is limited by the prat, and we should say masha prat zriya in midyachrin lo. So we'll say I should say that maybe it just comes to exclude zriya, planting, and that's it. Once again, asher ribuyuhu. Both said the word asher ultimately is a riboy, comes to include any soil-related activities will be prohibited, but any type of work on the ground, not in the ground, but on the ground will be permitted. Ziknia erochtzin yedei. So the elders of the city wash their hands over the decapitated corpse. Tanrabanon. V'chol ziknia hira krovim ala chalol yirchotzu esideim ala egla arufa benachal. So the pasuk says, all of the elders of the closest city will come and will go ahead, right? All the elders of the cities closest to the corpse will come and wash their hands over the decapitated calf in the Nachal. Shein tamaloma ha'arufa. Why does the pasuk have to say ha'arufa, decapitated? We already know it's decapitated. So the Gemara says, Matan ha'arufa, al makom arifasa shel egla. So we'll say it means that they dafka wash their hands where? On the actual spot where the calf was decapitated. Ba'amru. And they say, Yadenu lo shafbas hadam hazeh, ve'einenu lo ra'u, v'che'enu lo ra'u. Our hands did not spill this blood, and our eyes did not see what happened. V'chi'al libenu alsa, shebezdin shofchim damin. They both say, do we think for a moment that Bezdin spills blood, that these people have to say that they're innocent of this person's murder? Rather, what they are saying is, it's not like we saw him and we let him leave without mazonos, or or again we saw him and we didn't escort him out. So Tanya, so we'll say, so again, what they're saying is clearly this man fell between the cracks. We didn't see him, but chas v'shalom, we did not intentionally neglect him. So Tanya, this is incredible. Tanya, Hayre Meir Omer, Kolfin Lelevia, Sheschar Levia Ein Lashe. So we'll say we're going to start the sugya today and have to continue tomorrow. I will say we're going to now get into a detailed discussion regarding the power of escorting your guests. That's Levia, right? Escorting your guests. So the Gemara says, Ramir says, Kofin Levia. We force a person to go ahead and escort their guests. Sheschar HaLevia Ein Lashir. Because ultimately, again, the reward for escorting your guests, ultimately, again, is immeasurable. We'll discuss why that is. Shene Emar, Vayiru Hashomim Ish Yotze Min Ha'ir. So we'll say this is incredible. This is by Sefer Yoshua, when they were coming to go ahead and conquer the city of Beit El. So the Gemara says, right, so the Shomrim, right, the spies, they saw a man walking out of the city. Vayomrlo, they said to him, show us the entry point into the city, and we'll do good by you. We'll do good by you. Uksiv, so I'll say ultimately the man showed them the entrance way to the city so they could conquer it. Umar chesed asim, I'll say, what chesed did they do with this man? Shekol osair hargul of icharav, they killed all of the inhabitants of the city. Va'osa ish umishpachto shalchu, and this man and his family they saved, they sent away. So we'll say, so the pasuk says, Vayelech ha'ish, so this man, this very man who was saved, where did he go? Eretz Achitim, he went to the land of the Chitim. Vayiven Shamir, he built a city. Vayikra Shma Luz. We'll say, watch this. The name of the city was Luz. He Shma Adayom Hazeh. This is the name of the city until this very day. So I'll say, listen to this. So I'll say, what was unique about this city, Luz? What was unique about this? Tanya, he Luz Shetzovin Batcheles. So we'll say, this is the city of Luz. Ultimately, again, this is where they make Tcheles. Right? Shebas Sancheir v'lo Bilbala, Shebas Sancheir v'lo Bilbala, Both say this city of Luz, which was in Eretz, the city of Luz was never touched by Sancheiriv and was never destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. Incredible. So we'll say, what do you see from the city of Luz? Something special is happening over here. They made Tcheles there, which is incredible, right? And it was never touched by any of the invading armies. We'll say, get ready for this. Af Malach Hamavis Ein Rushos La'avarba. We'll say the city of Luz has such protection that even the angel of death, Malach Hamavas, cannot enter into the city. So I will say, if that's the case, then what happened? Listen to this. Ella zikinim sheba bisman shadaiton katzal lein. So we'll say, this is incredible. The elders, when they got tired of living, we'll say, this is an incredible yesod as well. Sometimes people get tired of living. Right? We'll say, you see this all the time. You see this all the time, where people get older, and the truth is, they feel, you know what? I've lived my life. I'm not scared of death, and I'm ready. I'm ready for the next chapter. And I will say, you know, that sometimes the greatest chesed that people could do for their loved ones is tell them that it's okay to let go. Because sometimes people fight for life, not for themselves, but they feel like an obligation towards family. The family's not going to be okay. And sometimes the greatest chesed that families do for loved ones is to tell them, we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. And you don't have to fight just for us. Just have to fight for us. So I will say, it's incredible yourself that sometimes there is a point where people become tired of living. So what happened? So what would they do in Luz? But in Luz, the Malach HaMavis had no power, to which the Gemara says, Yotzin chutz l'chom avei mesim. They would leave the city of Luz, and they would die only outside of the confines of the city. Incredible. But so I will say, now watch this. Now remember, who built the city of Luz? Who built the city of Luz? Who built it? This guy who showed the spies, or the soldiers, the way into the city of Beitel. And I will say, now, what the Gemara is saying is, essentially, he was malavid them. He escorted them into the city. And in the schus of that livoy, right? In the schus of ultimately, again, that accompaniment, not only was he saved, but what? Ultimately, again, he was given the privilege to build this city of Luz. And this city of Luz was so holy. This city of Luz was so intense that Mamish the Malach HaMaves didn't even have the power to remain inside of it. It's incredible. So this Kanani, who showed them entering into the city, he didn't say anything to them, and he wasn't even actually malav with them, right? He didn't escort them by accompanying them. Yet he caused salvation for himself and for all future generations. Then we'll say, what do you see from here? We'll say, if you actually escort someone when they're leaving your home, how much more schar you actually have. The Gemara says, how did this guy show them how to get into the city? He mouthed instructions to them. Rabbi Yochanan says he showed them with his finger how to go ahead and get into the city. There's a rice that supports Rabbi Yochanan. Because this Kanani ultimately went ahead and showed them with his finger, he caused salvation for himself and for all future generations. But say, so again, here the Gemara introducing us to the power of Levi. And I will say we'll have to stop over here for today. So again, tomorrow, and we're fine, by the way, we're right on target, right? Let's say, so tomorrow we're going to see, and again, make sure to be on time tomorrow, because we're going to start with the sugya tomorrow at 4:30 in the morning. Let's say, so no, we're going to start at 5:45, just kidding. Right? So let's say, so again, we're going to see the sugya of Leviah. Why is there such a power associated with escorting someone? That literally, again, kofin, we force someone to escort their guests. The power of escorting your guests is a power ultimately, again, a schus for your future generations. What that power is, why there is such a power, Emirat Rabosai, tomorrow's daf, shkoyach. All right, Chevron Zoom, have a great day, everyone.